2023年10月17日至18日，第3届“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛在北京举行。来自150多个国家和40多个国际组织代表来华参会。在10月18日下午举行的绿色发展高级别论坛上，400余名中外嘉宾齐聚一堂，共话绿色丝路。原定4个小时的论坛持续了5个半小时。“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟副理事长、“一带一路”绿色发展国际研究院院长埃里克·索尔海姆出席论坛并参与了专题对话。
What is the topic of the forum you take this afternoon?
The topic today is how to continue these green corridors, how to move into a lot more renewable energy investments, and how to help developing countries to make this happen. Because very often investors say, look, we have a lot of money, but there are no projects which we can invest in. And then those who have the projects say, no one will invest with us. So we have now formed also a global alliance which will try to bring together the banks, financial institutions on the Chinese side, and all those who can develop projects, I mean the hydropower companies or the wind power companies, and all the nations around the Belt and Road to bring this into one coalition to make sure that we have the money to invest in the green.
What is the focus of the panelists? What is their interest?
I think the main interest of all the developing countries is to tap into Chinese knowledge and expertise on going green, and even more to get Chinese investment in the green sectors. For example, I mean, when President Lula of Brazil came here, BYD announced that they will spend hundreds of millions of dollars setting up a factory for electrical cars in Brazil. The President of Argentina, supported by China in his nation. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia spoke about the railroad through his nation. So they are very, very eager to see green investment in China.
今年是共建“一带一路”倡议提出10周年。10年来，“一带一路”倡议朋友圈不断壮大，“一带一路”合作从亚欧大陆延伸到非洲和拉美。截至2023年8月，中国与150多个国家、30多个国际组织签署了200多份共建“一带一路”合作文件，共建绿色丝绸之路是其中的重要内容。中国与超过40个国家的150多个合作伙伴建立“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟，与32个国家建立“一带一路”能源合作伙伴关系，广泛搭建了绿色交流与合作的平台。
10 years have passed. What is your first impression on the Belt and Road Initiative first?
I think when we first heard of it, we were not sure that this will be any major initiative, and President Xi launched it as a speech in Almaty in Kazakhstan, and the first news was not really, we didn't understand the scope of the initiative at the time. Then very soon I understood that this will be the most important development initiative in our time, because China has the ability to share practice, to help with technology transfer, and of course has also the financial muscles to invest in other developing countries. So then I understood this is great, this is good, this is big, and if you believe it's big, you need to also look into how we can go greener.
索尔海姆曾担任联合国副秘书长兼环境规划署执行主任，还曾是挪威环境与外援大臣。他职业生涯的大部分时间都致力于在国家和全球层面解决环境和发展问题。2023年8月15日，中国首个全国生态日，索尔海姆现身浙江省安吉县渔村，这里是绿水青山就是金山银山理念的诞生地。今年是索尔海姆自2018年以来第3次到访浙江安吉。
This summer, you visited Anji County again. Mm-hmm. What changes did you find happened there?
The changes are absolutely visible everywhere. The city is now very, very clean, very green. And if you go to Anji, on the wall you saw some photos of the old factories in Anji. Frankly, horribly polluting. People were inhaling smoke when they were working in these factories, and the pollution to the outside world, to animals and to the flowers and the greenery, horrible. Now it's all cleaned up, and these old factory buildings are hotpot restaurants, coffee shops, centers to train young people in entrepreneurships, and even some really, really wonderful libraries. I mean, how wonderful isn't this transformation from pollution to green and creating jobs and prosperity on the way?
All this happened in about 10 or 20 years.
I think over 10 years, yes. Look, I mean, nearly all the European rivers, like the Rhine or the Danube, the Seine, which is going through Paris, or the rivers through London, all these were very polluted in the past. Now they're fairly clean. I mean, but that's taken maybe 30, 40 years. So what Zhejiang stands out is showing the world we can do this very fast.
In the history, most industrialized countries have experienced treatment after pollution. What is the specialty in Zhejiang or in China's approach in their experimentation on this anti-pollution?
In the past, you could only do that by pollution. There was no way to prosperity in the past without coal. That model started in the United Kingdom and spread to Germany, to France, to the United States, to Japan, to Korea, and to China. There are maybe one exception for it. Singapore was very wise. They even started to go green when they were poor. But normally, people focused on development, and then when they became affluent, they started focus on the environment. But that model is the past. That's the 20th century, because now we have the opportunity to go green and to prosper at the same time. That's, of course, exactly what President Xi pointed to when he said that green is gold, or that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. If we go green, we can create jobs, we can create prosperity. So there's no choice any longer between development and environment, which was the thing in the past.
作为一名全球环境与发展领导者，索尔海姆对中国非常熟悉和了解。自上世纪80年代以来，他多次到访中国，亲眼见证了人类历史上前所未有的变化。
Mr. Sondheim, from the 1980s, you began to travel to China. 40 years following that, you traveled a lot. Dramatic changes happened in China.
First time I came to China, that was 1984. There was no private cars in Beijing. One metro line in entire China. Took maybe 1.5 days to go by train from Beijing to Shanghai. All Chinese, or nearly all, were wearing very, very boring clothes. And basically they were eating rice in the south and noodles in the north. It was a completely different China. And of course this enormous economic development and improved happiness of the people, people should be all over the world should just admire this. Of course it happened in South Korea and Singapore and a few other places also, but nowhere at the scale of China.
2016年，索尔海姆出任联合国环境规划署执行主任。在他任职期间，联合国环境规划署与中国建立了更紧密的合作关系。
Also during that time, you were reported by a Western newspaper about your perceived closeness to China. What will you interpret the use of the word closeness?
Look, when I came into UN Environment, I realized that we had many more employees from Finland than from China. We had also many more from Finland than from India or Indonesia. China is 1.4 billion people. By the way, India is also 1.4 billion people, and Finland has 5 million. Obviously, because these institutions are screwed towards the Western world. So I took the view that the United Nations need to reflect the world not in 1945, but the world in 2023. And that world, well, Asia is 60%. China is the most rapidly developing nations in the world among the big economies. UN must reflect the world. And when I made this call for change,
2017年，习近平主席在首届“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛提出建设“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟。 联盟的筹建得到了联合国环境规划署的全面支持和参与。
It's true that some nations made some protests. Some Americans didn't like this, but then I told them, I'm very happy to work with you to promote the environment in the United States. Why shouldn't we work together to promote the environment in China and in all those nations which want to work with China? That's our duty. And that's simply the role of the UN, is to be there for the member states. And China is now one of the most important, or the member states of the UN, when it comes to environment protection, maybe the most important.
Mm-hmm. What will you do when you among this criticism about your closeness with China? Will you still go close with China?
Absolutely, because it's the right thing to do. When I'm in the US, I tell my American friends, look, maybe you should be a little bit more curious about China. This is the oldest civilization on the planet and have made miracles in the last decades, both on economic development and on the environment. So please learn something about Chinese history. But if I go to China, I will also tell Chinese, please be interested and curious about the United States. That's a marvelous nation, which is probably the most significant contribution to science and development of the last 200 years. And so both Chinese and Americans, I recommend, be curious about the other nation, try to learn, have a dialogue, so I get each other.
2017年，也就是提出建设“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟的这一年，索尔海姆实地考察了浙江省金华市浦江县。这个曾经有2.2万家水晶加工点，生态环境被水晶废水废渣蚕食殆尽的县城，在浙江千万工程指引下迎来了蝶变，而这一切变化都被索尔海姆看在眼里。
The 2018 Inspiration and Action Award goes to Zhejiang Green Rural.
2018年9月26日，美国纽约联合国总部，浙江省千村示范万村整治工程被授予联合国最高级别环保荣誉“地球卫士奖”。这是时任联合国环境规划署执行主任的索尔海姆和他的同仁们共同的决定。
我是裘丽琴，来自浙江省的一个农村。15年前，
作为领奖代表之一，浙江省安吉县鲁家村村民裘丽琴在现场向全世界分享了家乡的故事。
That here, a middle-aged lady named Qiu Liqin, if you can ring the bell of that lady.
Yeah.
How did her story impress you?
Look, for these things to happen, you need political leaders who set the direction. But unless people on the ground do the actual work, nothing will happen. All those people who would have been living along these rivers, maybe for generations, and then they saw the horrible pollution which was there, and then they cleaning up and making that a really, really livable place. I mean, Zhejiang is beautiful. It's one of the most really beautiful parts of China. There's a lot of hills, a lot of mountains. It's enormously green. So when you clean up the rivers, you create a kind of paradise on earth. And that's what they have done there. And she inspired that action.
What do you think? Do they do the right thing? They can win the war against pollution.
Zhejiang has done something which is absolutely remarkable. In 10 years, they transformed what was in the past called milky rivers in Zhejiang. Not milky because they were healthy like milk, but because they were white from pollution. They transformed these very polluted rivers into now absolutely clean. You can send a 2-year-old toddler into the streams and they will drink and no problem. And the scenery along them is fantastic, fabulous. Factories have been moved away. Tourists are walking, their walk path, their bridges, and you can see the cultural heritage and the beauty of the land. So I wanted to really honor this hard work of the people of Zhejiang, but of course also led by the political leadership of the province who really put this in place. And the speed here is what stands out compared to other parts of the world where it's taken much longer. And of course I see a lot of polluted rivers in many parts of the world. And I tell them, well, go to Zhejiang, be inspired, see how it can be done.
经过2年的筹建， 2019年4月，在第2届“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛上，“一带一路”绿色发展国际联盟正式启动。索尔海姆担任联盟咨询委员会主任委员。2020年12月1日，“一带一路”绿色发展国际研究院正式启动，索尔海姆出任研究院院长。2023年5月，联盟正式注册成立为首个“一带一路”框架下的国际环保组织，并举行了首次全体会议。索尔海姆获选担任副理事长。
What is your responsibility as the president of the institute?
To work with all the good people and scientists and economists and all the people who know this much, much better than I do. Most of them are Chinese, but also coming from other parts of the world, and also maybe to make some of the bridges between China and Europe, United States, and other parts of the world. While China is the most advanced nation on green technologies, it's not like China cannot learn. China can also learn from best practices in other parts of the world. We have advised Chinese government. For instance, we made so-called traffic light system for China, meaning that if an investment is obviously good for the environment, say solar, it's green. If it's obviously bad for the environment, say coal, it's red. And if it may be good, but maybe you need to make some improvements, say a hydropower plant, which is very good for the environment, but you need to look into how you do it. Or a road on a railroad is good, but maybe you should look into how there are overpasses so that wildlife can pass it, then it's yellow.
So for those developing countries along the Belt and Road, what will they benefit from China's experimentation on the anti-pollution wall?
I think there are two main ways they can benefit. Number one is just to learn. Speak to the Chinese leaders who implemented this, and speak to Chinese businesses and people who were part of it, and learn how it can be done. And secondly, of course, China through this has developed a lot of technologies and a number of businesses which can promote green development, and these businesses can also invest in Belt and Road countries. China is now the world leader in every green technology. 60 to 80% of solar, wind, hydropower, electric cars, electric buses are in China. So that technology and these companies should be encouraged to invest more and to trade more with developing countries. So the learning and the investment.
But China's approach on the remediation of the environment is with China's characteristics. Will they learn?
No one can copy China. You do it in your own way, but based on these experiences. If you try to copy China, you will fail, but you can learn.
2020年9月，中国政府向国际社会作出承诺，中国将力争于2030年前实现碳达峰，2060年前实现碳中和。次年9月，又正式宣布不再新建境外煤电项目。“一带一路”倡议已成为全球绿色发展的最大动力。一批清洁、高效、质优的绿色能源项目，点亮了共建国家未来发展之路。
I remember once you said the Belt and Road can serve as a platform to create a better global atmosphere and stop doing stupid things like decoupling or zero sum.
What we need is a system where we help each other, where we work together. Yes, there will be competition. I mean, say, car companies are competing about making the best electric cars so that they can sell it to you, and that's normal. That also drives the green transformation. But whatever is the big issue of the 21st century, no more pandemics, economic development, climate change, wars in Ukraine or Palestine, whatever is the issue, much easier to resolve if we work together.
一带一路倡议提出10年来，中国始终秉持人类命运共同体理念，持续推动提升一带一路绿色发展水平。在本届“一带一路”国际合作高峰论坛开幕式上，国家主席习近平宣布，中国支持高质量共建“一带一路”的8项行动，其中之一就是促进绿色发展。 论坛结束后，索尔海姆还要在中国待1周左右的时间。他的行程排得很满，大多都是与“一带一路”绿色发展和创新相关的研讨会和讲座。他的绿色之路还在继续。
What do you plan to do in the next decade of the Belt and Road?
But I think in the next decade we will see high-speed rail all the way from Beijing to Singapore, through Thailand and Malaysia, maybe also linking up Myanmar and Laos to this network, and you will be able to go in 24 hours from Beijing to Singapore. Fantastic for tourism, but of course also for the transport of goods and the connection here. There have been a huge investment in solar and wind and hydro after China stopped overseas all coal investments, so do more of that. But then also in the speech of President Xi at this conference here in Beijing, he also gave some of a new direction to Belt and Road. He said that we should look for something which is small and smart. We should look for high quality programs. And I think he also basically told us that Belt and Road should continue to work on the hard infrastructure, but should do more on art and culture and museums and health and education, kind of softer issues, but which are very, very important to people.